We are back here on Extra Rounds, and I'm pleased to be joined now by the fine actor Theo Rossi, who I will say actor / UFC addict is what the bio I think says. You've been a guy that I think is followed mixed martial arts for quite a while now. I remember when the UFC was on FX, and a whole ton of the cast of Sons of Anarchy was coming out, and you were there, and you had that juice haircut. You were sticking. You looked like a fighter, to be honest with you, Theo.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would probably at that point I'd be fighting around probably lightweight. Sure. Maybe
Why
a little
not?
less, I actually go back even way before that. I've told this story once or twice, is when I first got to LA, 99, 2000, Halloween, 99, 2000, I was a waiter and a bar back at this bar in LA on Sunset called Saddle Ranch. And it was like one of my first weeks there. They had an electronic bull, and in comes Tank Abbott, Shamrock, Chemo.
Right.
Everybody was there, Ken and Frank and the whole thing. And I remember the bouncer saying like, "Hey, these guys getting a fight. I'm not doing anything." And Tank was ready to go. And that's been since when I got kind of hooked on it and watched it ever since. So all the trials and tribulations, it's one of the few, it's a massive joy to me. It's my thing.
I love the cast of characters that you just sort of said walking in this bar, because that's like not only some well-known UFC fighters, that's like an entire generation of badasses. You know what I mean?
And it was the craziest night ever. I was waiting on them, and they had all come, and there's many more. There were many more dudes there, many more. And I think Chemo's wife was there, and he had the big tattoos on his neck.
Yeah.
And they were all getting these like jumbo prime ribs and steaks and drinking a lot. And I'm this new kid from New York City, and I was like, this is crazy. I was like, I can't believe they're all in here. And people used to get lit up like Christmas trees in that place. And at this time, it's not like right now, John Jones and Uriah Faber sitting at a table. You didn't know who these guys were. They're just very large, scary. And even in Frank and Ken's and all them, they're not, as big, and well, Ken is now, but it was like this one dude tried to start a fight.
Oh my God.
I was like, this is like the worst mistake you're ever going to make in your life.
Yeah.
And I told him, I said, listen, I understand you are drunk off Long Island iced teas and adios motherfuckers or whatever you're drinking. I said, you will have a broken neck.
I mean, seriously. And that's the thing too, like 99% of mixed martial artists and UFC fighters, they're not out looking for trouble. No. But Tank Abbott is one that is always looking for trouble.
You got to remember, this is a very different time. This is 22 years ago when no one knew the sport. I mean, this is when they were, thinking about putting a moat around the ring to try to draw attention to it.
God.
No one knew.
Like that's the thing. So I've been covering mixed martial arts now since 2004. And, I was 10, 11 years late to the party when you go back to the UFC's origin story in 1993. And like, when you read about the history, like you mentioned the moat, like they actually considered putting a moat with alligators around the damn Octagon. It's like, what kind of bizarro world did they live in?
They're just trying to get eyes, right? Because it was this combat. It goes back to, the lions and Roman gladiators and at its purest form. And I think, also what was so different about then, just to stay there for a moment, is you weren't like a mixed martial artist. You were a wrestler or a boxer, or, in Royce's case, when he dominated, BJJ, you just came in and you kind of like, that was your thing. And let's see what this style can do against that style. Tank being a bar brawler, right? Let's see what that can do. Remember Kimbo Slice being a backyard fighter. And that was even later in the game. It's like, it's that old question of lion, bear, tiger, right? Like who wins? And now it's become so sophisticated, right? It's very sophisticated, as in everybody's trained in something. And I think that's what, to me, is watching it as a fan from then on, training, doing whatever. It's so incredible to watch how things change, and the people who have been the groundbreakers in that route to it.
It's like a television series that never ends, really.
It's true.
So
it's like the Rockford Files or one of those,
right?
Or Walking Dead. Yeah. It's
Yeah,
been on forever.
100%. And I can't get enough. And like I said, I've been doing this for far too long, 18 years or so. But what about the modern day UFC athletes? Like who attracts your attention?
Yeah, I've always been fascinated by world changers. Now, I'm not saying that they're the greatest. That's always a point of view, subjective conversation. But when you watch people, because you can see it, right? If you're a fan and a real fan, you knew when like Connor started doing his thing, it was special, right? You're like, wow, this is kind of like that once in a lifetime, right? It's like if you were around, if you were a hip hop head like I was when Tupac and Biggie were doing that, you're like, something's different about these guys than everybody else. Something's different about the Wu-Tang. This is weird, right? There's 12, 20, 15 of them. How many are there? And they have superhero names under their regular names, and their regular names aren't even their names. So when Connor came, it was kind of like, okay, that has happened before, you know, but it wasn't with that the propulsion that it did. And Connor's success leads to like Masvidal's success, leads to Colby's success, leads to everybody kind of creating this hybrid, like almost like entertainment sports, like entertainment and the fighting, right?
Yeah.
To have it both. So for me right now, I'm always a giant fan of the reserved, you know, of the Khabib, who just, you know, the Terminator aspect, like, hey, you can talk and I'm just going to win, right? You know, I think John Jones is the greatest fighter that's ever lived. I think it would be very hard for anyone to argue that if you know anything about anything.
If anyone argues that John Jones isn't the GOAT, they're arguing semantics that have nothing to do with actual Octagon performance.
No, that's when they start doing what they do to Floyd, where it's like, well, what about his competition? And it's like, yeah, DC's pretty great, right? He's a Hall of Famer. It's like, you know, I get what I get the need to do that, right? Where you say, you know, Tyson didn't fight the people Ali did. And it's like, I get that. I understand that. But also those guys brought out a certain thing, right? So I think that Connor and Masvidal and guys, I'm so intrigued by right now it's Volkanovski. You know, I just think he is something special to watch. I mean, he's relentless.
Yeah.
But also what he walked around at, who he used to be to who he is like a different, and nobody even knows that he was this giant.
It's like a different dimension. Like he like morphed into a different,
like a multiverse.
Timeline.
In the multiverse, he was 220 in one multiverse. And now what is he? He's the champ at what? 155?
145.
145. He's shredded and fast, and he didn't lose a beat. So I think, you know, when I look at that, I'm such a fan of John as a fighter, and I've met John many times. And you know, nothing but I can only judge people how they are. To me, he's incredible to me. You know, and again, I kind of live in the space of like, I like TJ Dillashaw a lot, you know, I just do, mainly because this is like my Barry Bonds reference that I say. When people talk about Barry Bonds as a baseball player, and I go, yeah, sure, he could do everything that he did. You still got to hit the baseball.
That's true. It's not easy to hit the ball.
You still got to hit a 99 mile an hour or 101 mile an hour, you know, high heat from Randy Johnson. So you can say whatever you want about strength and performance and whatever, but you're talking about a guy who had probably one of the best eyes in baseball. Dillashaw is a killer, right? Killashaw. I mean, he's a killer. So yeah, he messed up and he did whatever. Let's see now, because there are many guys that have had setbacks. And what I love is the ones who make the comeback from the setback. Amanda Nunes, what she just did is incredible. You could everybody can say, we knew that was going to happen. No, you didn't. No, you didn't. Everybody thought Julian Pena was the new breed. She was the one who was going to come in. And Amanda Nunes was like, hold on. I had a kid. I slipped up for a second. Let me just come back. And now that's the GOAT, right? That's the GOAT, and obviously the female GOAT, you know, to me more than Cyborg. And I know that's probably controversial, but like,
I don't think so. I mean, for me, like, I hate to say this, like one of the best things that George St. Pierre ever did in his career, Theo, was lose to Matt Serra because it proved that he could come
100%.
back from adversity. And to me, a champion is not really greatest of all time status until you see them falter a little bit and then come back better than ever before. And that was GSP after he lost one of the biggest fights in UFC history.
100%. And it's the Gustafsson versus John Jones fight. It's the Ally Quinter against Khabib. Like I'm watching that as a kid from New York and I'm going, wait a second, is Ally Quinter beating him up a little? Like what's happening? Is he letting him do this? Right. And to me, I would bet, and I don't know Khabib, but I would bet that he went and he was like, okay, that was not supposed to go like that. Right. And that now improves you. Because I know that that's like that in my job. It's like, you know, you hit some things and you go, oh, I didn't do the work on that, or I did not see that character from that. So let me not make that mistake again and let me do it like this. So again, I believe that my favorite fighters, it's why you can never count Nate Diaz out, right? It's like because you can never count anyone in the sport out, but there are also certain fighters that you go, okay, maybe it's been too long, maybe it's time to go, or maybe it's, you know, whatever. And listen, man, I get it. You know, I'm going to die on my sword too. And when that's what you know, that's what you're doing. But at the same time, there are certain guys that are in there that are dangerous no matter when they're in there. Nate's one of those guys.
100%. Totally feel that. You mentioned your work. Let's talk a little bit about what you got going on the way out here. I believe the project is called Emily the Criminal, and it sounds like it's doing really good. You know, on Rotten Tomatoes and
highest rated.
Yeah, that's
top
awesome.
5 highest rated film of the year. We just got, I think, top 10 in the National Board of Review. You know, they'll do the big awards push. I just got a text from the producer because it came out on VOD yesterday and they're like, it's number 3 on Apple. I was like, wow, here we are with this little movie that costs less than, you know, to buy a house right now, especially where you are in Southern California. And, you know, it's just that little train that could. And Aubrey and I are so excited about it. She produced it. I did the movie for her, you know, and because of her and her talent and her as a producer and John Patton Ford, the director. So it's this really cool thing. I think if it came out 10 years ago, it came out 10 years from now, it would still be relevant in today's society. It's dealing with student debt and the limits of what people will go to. You know, debt in general is something we all understand, right? And then it's like, okay, well, if you can solve that by potentially doing some crimes to faceless people, you know, in the fact of credit card scams, like, would you do it? And
let me tell you, my wife went to like a for-profit art school, so she racked up way too much student debt.
There you go.
I'm right there about ready to commit some crimes.
Yeah. So if somebody presents you with a little, you know, thing, and they go, hey, you're never going to meet these people, but you're going to take it $2 here and $1.50 there, and you know, you rack that up, and it's going to be worth this much money. So I think that it's also a movie that kind of presses what the limits that people will go to, which is really. Listen, it's one of the things that ties into sport. It ties into MMA. It ties into anything. It's like, what are you willing to do against the system to get ahead? So it's a movie that bucks the system. Like we just said, the greatest fighters kind of buck the system. But you got to be the one who's gonna. I'm not saying that no criminal wants to do crime, but it's like some people they got nothing to lose, and it's like some fighters who have to fight. Like that might not be their choice. But if you got nothing to lose and you're, you know, growing up somewhere in the Eastern Bloc and it's like, that's your only way out. Yeah. That's what you're doing.
Yeah. Especially with the credit card stuff, like you're talking about now, a couple dollars from someone you've never heard of or ever going to meet. It feels like a victimless crime for the perpetrators.
That's right. Especially if it's done to thousands of people. Right. And that's what's so interesting about it. But again, at the heart of it, it's her dealing with these exuberant student loans, which has been in the media like crazy, and the incredible amount of interest that's on these, and that they're being, you know, handed to children, people who can't even drink. It's like, hey, by the way, you can't have a Miller Lite, but would you like to take $200,000 that you're going to pay for the rest of your life? And it's like, I guess so.
And you're not even like aware of what that number really is at 17, 18 years old. It feels like so.
Yeah. And I think that to me, that's something that the movie touched on. I think that's why it's resonating with people so much. I think the movies we love will always tap into something in us. You know, well, the movies I love, right? It's like, you know, I got 2 little kids, and you watch Goonies and it's about adventure, right? So you can
Right.
think about going on the adventure and like what that would be like. And I think that any films that tap into something where you go, oh, I've been in that position. What would I do? What would I do? And
Right.
I think, for what you do, I think it's why, 18 years of what you do, why we have a love for combat and fighting. I'm around a lot of guys, high level guys, especially now. One of my buddies just left who just got, he's a black belt, just got his first tip, BJJ. He's a great instructor. And it's like, that's incredible, right? When people hear that, there's something intriguing about that, where you're like, wow, you could decimate a large part of the population in hand-to-hand combat. That's
Right.
amazing, right? And I think that we're intrigued by the things that we can't or maybe are not willing to do. And that's what I think Emily the Criminal kind of is resonating with people. I think that's why mixed martial arts resonates with people.
100%. Emily the Criminal, available now on streaming platforms. Go check it out. Theo, I appreciate the time. I'm not great with my Texas geography. I know you're in Austin, but one of the best BJJ tournaments is going down in El Paso here at the end of October in the Eddie Bravo Invitational.
Yep.
You come out if you're free.
10th planet, right? Is it 10th planet?
That's his system. Yeah, the 10th planet system. But he's got a one night 16-man absolute tournament coming up with no weight classes, and then the night before that is Medusa, which is female only combat jiu-jitsu, so they're allowed to palm strike on the floor.
Oh wow, if I was here, if I'm in town, I might make my way out there. Thanks, brother. I appreciate you, and I love what you do, and keep doing it.
Thanks, Theo. Appreciate it, and best of luck winning some awards with this film.
Thank you, bro.